When New York Court of Appeals top judge Janet DeFiore resigned last summer, it created an opening that the governor of New York State, Kathy Hochul, freshly being after sworn into her first full term, is attempting to fill. She has to fill that seat on the highest court in the state. And her pick was a guy named Hector LaSalle, who is a right-leaning prosecutor with a conservative record on reproductive issues, labor issues, criminal justice issues. Hakeem Jeffries is helping rally support for him with Kathy Hochul. They did a couple of sort of town hall meetings and rallies on his behalf in New York City this past week. And so the New York sort of Democratic brass is going very hard for this guy. He was just shot down in the Senate Judiciary Committee 10-9. His nomination was defeated. Hochul is now trying to sue her own party, claiming that he did not get a fair committee hearing, and basically overriding the Judiciary Committee and bringing his nomination to a vote in the New York State Senate. So just like when they do a Supreme Court nomination nationally, the committee votes on whether or not to advance that nomination to the Senate floor. If a vote fails at the committee level, pardon me, then that nominee goes down. If they pass through that level, then the broader Senate votes. So the nomination is in trouble, but let's hear a little bit, or let's read a little bit rather, about Hector LaSalle's opinions on these three crucial issues to, yes, progressives, but also Democrats more broadly. This is from a recent article in Slate by Alex Salmon, who we actually had the pleasure of interviewing last year. Great writer and reporter. A decade ago, the New York AG launched an investigation into an anti-abortion crisis pregnancy center accused of practicing medicine without a license. In an extraordinary decision, LaSalle voted to shield the fake clinic from the probe. The ruling barred state investigators from reviewing advertisements and promotional literature, brochures, and pamphlets that the center provided or disseminated to the public on First Amendment grounds, even though these documents were critical to determining whether the clinic falsely promoted its services as genuine medical care. So that's one suspicious.
And you know, it was interesting, not to break the flow.
Sure, that's all right.
But in his hearings, he said it is really interesting and very typical of the way these people play to the friendly press, because you had a lot of press that was basically trying to pull the those leftists going after a good man kind of shit. And he said, no, I am pro-choice. That was just my ruling on this. I agreed with the issues there, but he doesn't explain why. Like, that ruling doesn't make any sense. You know, he didn't actually explain what his legal reasoning was, why he's pro-choice and yet ruled that way. Hey, I'm a free speech purist. I could appreciate a good First Amendment argument. There isn't one there.
Yeah, that's not right. Exactly.
That the whole thing. That's like saying you are suing a business for fraudulent advertising, but you cannot produce the advertising as evidence because that's impinging on their freedom of speech.
Right.
That's essentially what this ruling is. It's completely nonsensical. It makes no sense at all. The case is that they're practicing medicine without a license, and you can't look at what their claims were.
Right, of course.
That's the case.
Of course. It has nothing to do with First Amendment.
Right, of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
First Amendment does not cover fraud.
Of course. If it did, there'd be no such thing as fraud.
George Santos would be doing great, right?
If it did, there'd be almost no such thing as fraud.
There would be.
It'd be impossible to prosecute fraud.
Right. It would be your freedom of speech to lie
right.
in your advertising.
To prevent corporations from harassing unions, New York bars management from suing unions or union leaders in their official capacity. In 2015, however, LaSalle joined a shocking opinion that carved a massive loophole into this law. Here's interesting, Mr. Free Speech, allowing Cablevision to sue union leaders for criticizing the company's management response to Hurricane Sandy. The opinion rendered labor protections toothless, giving corporations an easy workaround until the Court of Appeals shut it down. So he didn't feel too strongly about the First Amendment there.
Around?
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. First Amendment concerns, not so much. Not so much. In a 2014 ruling, LaSalle voted to prohibit a criminal defendant from appealing his conviction. The defendant claimed he was the victim of an illegal search, yet prosecutors persuaded him to sign an ambiguous, misleading waiver of his right to appeal. A trial court judge failed to tell the defendant the actual impact, of this waiver. LaSalle thought that was fine, but the Court of Appeals later repudiated the decision, holding that a waiver of appeal can't mischaracterize what rights are waived. Now, this is where I think the rubber meets the road here, okay? People are wondering why Hochul is fighting so hard for this guy. They're like, is this just incompetence? Did she just not vet this pick enough? She didn't vet her lieutenant governor very well. He had to resign about 9 months after he took the job, which, by the way, is part of the reason why the Democrats lost that House seat in New York's 19th, because she had to recruit the sitting congressman from an incumbent spot, vacating that seat, right? But that, anyway, we can get to that in a moment. This is not an issue of vetting. I don't believe it's just incompetence. I don't believe it's a lack of preparation. I believe that a politician, when they do something because they see a benefit for themselves in it. I don't believe a politician makes a move unless they can see what potential benefit there is in it for them. Now, they don't always get it right? They don't always see into the future whether or not it's going to work out. But they always act with a plan. Okay, what's this going to get me? And I think this ruling is not about abortion. It's not about labor. It's about crime. Hochul won her governor's race by a measly 5 points. Democrats in New York State underperformed greatly in the midterms because of crime. And she is thinking she needs to put a tough on crime judge on the bench. And she knows that progressives are not going to be happy with that. So she's like, what if I make it a brown tough on crime judge? How about that? Maybe that'll have it both ways for me a bit. But I think that's what this is. I think the fact that he has a tough on crime record, that he's a prosecutor, is why she's pushing so hard, because she won by a very narrow margin. Crime was a big issue that hurt her party very, very badly. And I think she wants to put a tough on crime judge on the bench. And this is how Democrats fuck up. This is how these issues get away from them and get away from their base. Because I don't think she's putting this guy on there because he's anti-choice. I think she's looking the other way because she needs a tough on crime pick. And so, yeah, that comes with these other opinions. But, whatever. Maybe that's down the road. Except now it's not down the road, because this would give conservatives a 4-3 majority on the highest court in the state at a time where there is no Roe versus Wade.
Okay, so...
And then what happens when you lose the governor's race by 3 points next time? Or what happens when there's a Republican president in a couple years and all of a sudden you don't have the court as this institutional safeguard against reactionary right-wing social policy coming down from on high? So I think it's just a very, very sleazy, opportunistic move. I think she's playing to a small slice of who she thinks of as persuadable voters in an anti-crime play. And I think she's just acting with very, very reckless disregard for the other consequences that come with putting this tough on crime right-wing agent on the court.
I agree. I think there's more to it as well, though. So the court in this 2-1 favoring Democrat state is conservative in the first place, because you had Cuomo was running his little scheme there, where you had these Democrats that would vote with the Republicans.
It was the
Now,
IDC, the
The
Independent
IDC,
Democrat.
most of them got voted out. I think all of them got voted out.
It was,
what was
yeah,
that?
it was disbanded
2018.
basically. Enough of
That
them
was like
voted out.
2018. They got whacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was this big mass wave where most of them got voted out. Now, if they put a genuine progressive in there, that's going to tilt the court in a progressive-ish direction. You know, you're still going to have conservatives on the court, so I wouldn't go so far as to say progressive, but it's going to tilt it overall to the left. They can't have that, man. New York is the most corrupt state in America. The last thing they want is for the next 14 years to have a court that's going to rule in a progressive direction on labor rights, that's going to rule in a progressive direction on corporate power, on neighborhood rezoning, redevelopment. They can't have that. They can't. Their donors can't have that. So yes, I agree with you. The crime is part of it, but I think it's bigger than that. New York is so corrupt. These politicians are so reliant on these big money donors that own them. What do you think those people are telling them? You better make sure this court doesn't tilt left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very possible as well. I still think there's a lot of room between a left nominee and this guy. Like, I think they could have done a little bit better. Like, if that was their game, what, they couldn't find some sleazy centrist Democrat judge in New York? I mean, New York is the home of sleazy centrist Democrats. Like, they couldn't do better than him. I think, you know, this is a political pick because of that crime issue. And I think she thought that, you know, and look, she's probably not wrong. I mean, she's taking heat for it.
I think the crime is part of it. But I think there's other things. Like, why did Hakeem Jeffries come down? That's not just crime. That's not just crime. That's money, man. Hakeem is all about the Benjamins. Yeah, He's all about his hedge funds.
It's interesting. That's a question no one's been able to really answer. I've read articles about this. I've heard interviews about this. People cannot answer that. People chalk it up to, you know, old habits dying hard. You know, he's just a New York sort of power player. He backs what the party wants. But now these are different shoes that he's in now, man. I mean, he's the leader of the national party. So why are you going so hard for this guy? And why is Hochul still going so hard for this guy?
It's the donors. The donors want this guy. I'm not saying the crime's not part of it, but there's more to it.
Well, here's the other thing about this. This is an angle that I think is interesting. It was the New York State Democratic Party, and, you know, we talk about the IDC, but the deference shown in the legislative body and by Cuomo himself to the right wing in New York is what led to conservative courts in the first place. It was a conservative court that rejected the initial redistricting map of New York State.
Yep.
And so they redrew the map, which we covered this very extensively because this affected not only the state, but it affected especially my neck of the woods, where you had districts 17, 18, and 19 get redrawn such that Maloney jumped ship. Now, if that asshole had not jumped ship, they probably would have survived this.
Right.
But the redistricting caused a situation where Maloney was able to justify vacating his district, the 18th, forcing Mondaire Jones out of the 17th, leaving open spots in 17th, 18th, and 19th. The Democrats ended up losing 2 out of those 3 seats in the midterms. They lost 4 seats overall in New York because of this redistricting by the conservative court.
Right.
Those 4 seats, by the way, are the difference between 218 and where they are now. So in AOC's video that we talked about last week, as much as almost everything she said in that video was wrong, the one thing she said in that video that was not wrong is that had it not been for New York losing 4 seats and Lauren Boebert winning her race, Republicans wouldn't have the House now. The Democrats would have the House. But 4 flips came in New York State. So it really was a red wave of sorts here in New York State, largely because of the maps handed down by these courts. And so when you put this kind of power in a conservative hand, not only does that undermine state politics, but in a situation like last year, as you saw, it could ruin your majority in the House nationally.
Right. Well, it's just kind of amazing that Hochul, given the advantage that Democrats have in the state, really squeaked through. What did she win by 5 points or something? Just 5 points
against the guy who your line was. He looks like the manager of a McDonald's when the milkshake machines broke. Lee Zeldin, just perpetually panicked and aggrieved middle manager douchebag.
To talk about suing, like, look, if this were the Republican Party, and you got this kind of backlash from every quarter as soon as you announced this judge, they would have withdrawn the nomination.
Of course, you withdraw.
To so go out of your way to infuriate everybody. And this says everything. You have the unions, you have the NAACP. They were all against this guy. You know this forum? What's his name? What's the name of this judge?
Hector LaSalle.
LaSalle, that's what I thought. Latinos for LaSalle. That's all they could come up with. All identity politics. That's it. They couldn't find somebody make it workers' party for LaSalle. They couldn't find anything like that. All they could produce was an identity politics appeal against the entire base of the party.
Well, that's what's so interesting about this. I mean, and this does give some credence to your theory that the donors want this guy and that they want to make sure they can keep the left in check in New York, because New York, is a state where left organizing has been successful in terms of state and local offices. DSA has actually done well in New York City, and even in some places up here, even in my neck of the woods, right? And this may just be that they want to show strength. They want to show strength against the left. They want to show them that, no, you're not going to push us around. You block us at the committee level. This is New York, baby, right? We got ways of working around that, right? The New York State Democratic Party has a long history of being able to strong-arm people who are in its way, whether they're on the left or the right. And maybe that is what this is, because you're right. The smart political move here is to just scrap him and find somebody else, especially, like I said earlier, in New York State, where you must have an infinitely deep bench of corrupt asshole Democrats that you can call upon. It's not like there's any shortage of those people here, right? You take a walk down the street, you'll find a corrupt fucking asshole Democrat who will serve on the court. Yeah, why not? Yeah, but so the level of defiance for that reason is kind of head scratching, and it makes you think that yes. And I've heard people say this, and it's an unfortunate thing. It's something that you can only speculate until you know more. But people have said, yeah, there's probably stuff going on behind the scenes that would explain much better why they're digging in so hard on getting this judge through.
Please clap.